Dad handed his restaurant to my sister, not me, saying, "She's my future, you're just the silly waiter." I quit the next morning. Years later, I owned 3 locations and my sister literally burned his place down. My own father looked me dead in the eye, dismissing 2 decades of my life with 5 simple words: "She's my future. You're just a silly waiter." That moment didn't just break me, it forged a fire within me that would ultimately watch his entire legacy go up in smoke. The dining room hummed with the usual Sunday dinner sounds: clinking silverware, hushed conversations, the comforting smell of Eleanor's elaborate cooking. But the air around our table was thick with something else, a quiet anticipation that felt less like hope and more like dread. Growing up, Arthur's restaurant was my second home. By 7, I was on a wooden crate, learning to chop onions without crying. By 10, I could work the line during dinner rush, calling orders like someone twice my age. I genuinely believed it would be my future. My sister, Chloe, was different. She hated it. While I spent summers mopping floors and learning the business, she was at cheerleading camp or the mall. Arthur never made her learn a thing. Eleanor would occasionally suggest Chloe help, but Arthur always waved it off, saying, "Let kids be kids." The irony was crushing. I begged to learn, offering free labor, while Chloe, the golden child, wanted nothing to do with it. She got a brand new car at 16, I got a used sedan with 150,000 miles. Her college tuition was paid, I worked at the restaurant part-time for my local college expenses. The pattern was clear, but I convinced myself my dedication would eventually be recognized. Family dinners became unbearable. Chloe would complain about demanding professors, and Arthur would sympathize as if these were genuine hardships. When I mentioned double shifts or difficult suppliers, he'd barely look up. Eleanor tried to balance it, asking me about operations, but her efforts only highlighted Arthur's disinterest in my work. Even Marco, our head chef for 15 years, noticed. He pulled me aside one night, telling me I had more natural talent than anyone he'd seen in decades. He said it was a shame some people couldn't see what was right in front of them. His meaning was crystal clear. I threw myself deeper into learning. Online courses in hospitality, food cost analysis, inventory systems, I devoured it all. I started going with Arthur to the restaurant supply store, building vendor relationships, learning pricing. He seemed content to let me handle these details while he socialized. After my associate degree, at 20, I returned full-time. Arthur promoted me to assistant manager, which sounded good until you realized I did the work of 3 people for barely above minimum wage. I handled inventory, schedules, vendors, and still worked the floor. Matteo, our new head chef, echoed Marco, saying I understood a restaurant's rhythm better than people with decades more experience. Chloe graduated from her expensive university with a communications degree and no real prospects. She moved back home, posting on social media, going out. Arthur never pressured her to get a job. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, essentially running his restaurant while he took longer vacations with Eleanor. Things shifted when Chloe turned 25. Suddenly, she developed an interest, not in the work, but the image. She'd stop by during lunch rush in designer clothes, taking photos for Instagram. She'd sit at the bar, ordering cocktails, chatting with customers about her family's place as if she'd contributed anything. Arthur ate it up, bragging about both his daughters being involved. At 26, I approached Arthur about partnership. I'd worked there my entire life. The restaurant was thriving, largely due to the systems I'd implemented. I presented a detailed proposal outlining growth and expansion. Arthur glanced at it for 30 seconds before setting it aside, saying we'd discuss it later. Weeks passed. Whenever I brought it up, he changed the subject. That familiar pit of dread formed in my stomach, the same one I felt every time Chloe got something I'd worked twice as hard for. Then came the family dinner that changed everything. Arthur called a special meeting about the restaurant's future. I showed up nervous but hopeful, thinking he'd finally reviewed my proposal. Eleanor cooked an elaborate meal. Chloe was unusually excited. After dessert, Arthur cleared his throat, talking about his pride in building the restaurant, how it supported our family, and how he was ready for succession planning. My heart pounded. This was it. Years of dedication were about to pay off. Then he turned to Chloe and smiled. He'd decided to transition ownership to her over the next few years. She'd start training immediately. He praised her fresh perspective and marketing savvy, excited for her to bring the restaurant into the modern age. Chloe squealed with delight, hugging him, thanking him profusely. She immediately launched into ideas, Instagram-worthy plating, influencer partnerships, modernizing the brand. None of it touched actual operations. Arthur nodded enthusiastically. I sat there, frozen. Eleanor looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Arthur finally turned to me, almost as an afterthought, saying I could continue as manager. Then came the words that still burn, she's my future. You're just a silly waiter. Chloe has the personality and vision to really make this place shine. The worst part was how casually he said it, like stating an obvious fact. Chloe didn't even register the insult. Eleanor flinched, remaining silent. My hands shook under the table, a mix of rage and heartbreak. Just a silly waiter. 20 years reduced to that. I'd sacrificed holidays, relationships, and dedicated myself completely. None of it mattered because Chloe had a pretty smile and social media followers. I didn't argue. I excused myself, drove home, and stared at the wall until sunrise. Something hardened inside me during those dark hours. My entire life, I'd sought his approval. Now I knew it would never come. The only person validating my worth would be me. The next morning, I typed a formal resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice, professional and courteous. I dropped it off before lunch, handed Arthur my keys, and walked out. He seemed surprised, genuinely thinking I'd be happy to stay. He called after me, but I was already gone. Walking away from that building felt surreal. Every corner held a piece of my history, but none of it was enough to earn basic respect. Eleanor called, crying, asking me to reconsider. She admitted Arthur's decision wasn't fair but begged me not to destroy the family. I told her I wasn't destroying anything, I was finally putting myself first. She tried to excuse Arthur's traditional views, a pathetic justification for blatant favoritism. I told her I loved her but needed my own path. Arthur called twice that first week, each call shorter. He oscillated between guilt-tripping me and acting like my departure was a phase. He mentioned how much harder things would be without me, how staff missed me, how he needed someone reliable. Never an apology. Never an acknowledgement of his cruel words. His inability to take responsibility only reinforced my decision. Those first few months were brutal. I worked 3 jobs to save money, researching everything about starting a restaurant. Evenings at an upscale bistro, mornings at a bustling cafe, weekends at a catering company. Every spare moment went into a business plan and scouting locations. I lived on ramen and coffee, slept maybe 4 hours a night, pushing myself harder than ever. The bistro job was a blessing. Vivian, the 60-year-old owner, noticed my work ethic and began mentoring me. She'd built her own restaurant empire and saw the same hunger in me. Vivian connected me with investors, suppliers, and industry contacts. She reviewed my plan, giving brutally honest feedback that made it 10 times stronger. 18 months after leaving Arthur's, I found a small space in a developing neighborhood. The rent was affordable, attracting young professionals. I named it Harvest Kitchen, focusing on fresh, local ingredients, a seasonal menu. Simple, executed with precision. Startup capital was the hardest part. Banks weren't interested. Vivian helped me connect with a small business investment group specializing in women-owned ventures. I pitched them with every ounce of passion, backed by detailed projections. They funded 60% of my startup costs for a minority stake. Opening day was terrifying and exhilarating. I hired a small, experienced team, including Matteo, a fantastic chef from the city's best kitchens. We started with a limited menu, each dish perfected. The dining room seated 40. The first week nearly broke me. POS issues, a walk-in cooler losing temperature, a gas line problem. I worked 18-hour days, troubleshooting, filling in. Matteo handled the kitchen chaos, I managed the front of house. My team stuck with me, proving I'd hired the right people. Our first major test came 3 weeks in, a local food critic unannounced. My heart dropped. She was known for destroying new restaurants. There was nothing to do but ensure she received exceptional service. Matteo sent out his finest work that night. Her review, published 5 days later, changed everything. She praised the seasonal menu, the quality, the unpretentious excellence. She noted the intimate space, the professionally warm service. A flood of reservations followed. Word spread. Within 6 months, we had a consistent wait list. The business was succeeding not by luck, but by solid fundamentals and genuine care. I didn't keep tabs on Arthur's restaurant. I was too busy building my own success. Eleanor would occasionally call with updates, mentioning Chloe bringing in a younger crowd. I kept conversations brief. That chapter was closed. About a year after Harvest Kitchen opened, I ran into Sarah, a former coworker. She'd quit months after I left. We grabbed coffee, and she filled me in. Chloe's involvement had been a disaster. She immediately tried to rebrand without understanding the core identity, changing the menu, spending thousands on influencer marketing that brought in photo seekers, not repeat customers. Long-time regulars left. The real problem started with Chloe's management. She'd show up late, leave early, spend most of her time staging photos. She fired experienced staff who questioned her, hiring friends with zero restaurant experience. The kitchen culture I'd built fell apart. Sarah described incidents that made my blood boil. Chloe fired Marco because he refused to make her ridiculous deconstructed versions of classic dishes. She put a college friend on salary as a social media manager with no clear responsibilities. Chloe would hold mandatory meetings about branding, ignoring broken ice machines or unpaid vendor invoices. The quality control I'd established vanished. Chloe decided pre-made sauces were cheaper than in-house. She eliminated local farm deliveries for cheaper distributors. When customers complained, she blamed the kitchen staff. Long-time regulars left negative reviews. Arthur tried to intervene, but Chloe threw tantrums, threatening to walk away. Caught between losing his daughter and losing his business, he enabled her. Revenue declined. Sarah said the restaurant was in serious financial trouble, losing suppliers, dropping health inspection scores. The neighborhood institution was known for inconsistent food and poor service. I felt vindication, but mostly sadness for Arthur and the legacy he allowed to be destroyed. Harvest Kitchen continued to grow. By the end of year 2, I planned a second location. Vivian connected me with a broker who found a perfect space in the city center. I secured better financing based on my track record. Harvest Kitchen downtown opened just after my 30th birthday, with an expanded menu and full bar. Managing 2 locations was intense, but I'd learned to build strong teams and delegate. We maintained standards while having distinct personalities. The business model worked. The city center location had different challenges, a corporate lunch crowd. Matteo and I developed a streamlined menu. We introduced a 3-course business lunch served within 45 minutes, incredibly popular. Dinner focused on elaborate dishes and wine pairings. Training managers for 2 locations meant documenting systems. I created detailed operations manuals, instituted weekly meetings. Vivian helped me develop leadership training, ensuring consistency and empowering managers. The financial success felt surreal. I went from 3 jobs in ramen to a comfortable salary, reinvesting in the business. I bought a small house, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. health insurance, retirement savings, disposable income, for the first time. More importantly, I proved to myself I could build something sustainable through competence and determination. Around this time, Eleanor called more frequently. She danced around Arthur's restaurant before admitting how bad things had gotten. Chloe had walked away after 3 years, claiming stress. She left a mess of unpaid bills, broken vendor relationships, and a demoralized staff. Arthur, now in his 60s, was trying to salvage what remained, dealing with serious financial problems. Eleanor asked if I'd consider helping. She framed it as Arthur being too proud to ask. I told her I had my own businesses, I couldn't drop everything. She cried, saying Arthur had learned his lesson. I felt sympathy, but I wasn't anyone's backup plan. The situation deteriorated. Arthur took out loans against the property. Longtime employees left. He tried to sell, but no one wanted a failing restaurant with debt and a damaged reputation. His pride and joy had become an albatross. I opened my third location in a quiet borough, known for family dining. Harvest Kitchen Grove featured a larger space with outdoor seating, a menu appealing to a broader demographic. The opening was covered by regional food media, mentioning my background. One reporter asked about my family's restaurant history. I kept my answer vague. That article caught Arthur's attention. Eleanor called, saying you wanted to talk. I agreed to meet for coffee, curious. Part of me hoped for an apology. Part of me knew better. We met at a neutral coffee shop. Arthur looked older, more tired. He congratulated me with a forced smile. We made awkward small talk before he got to the point. He asked detailed questions about my business model, staffing, suppliers. It felt strange, his genuine interest in details he'd never cared about when I worked for him. I answered honestly, explaining my systems, staff retention, menu development. He nodded, taking mental notes, before revealing his agenda. He wanted to know if I'd take over his restaurant. He framed it as an opportunity for me to come home and expand my portfolio. He talked about restoring its reputation, making it profitable. He even suggested renaming it Harvest Kitchen. The audacity took my breath away. He wanted me to bail him out of his own choices. To invest my time, money, and reputation into fixing the disaster he created by favoring Chloe. He was offering me the opportunity to save the business he once said I was too silly to deserve. I told him no. I explained I'd built my success without his help or approval. My restaurants thrived because of solid principles, things his place clearly lacked. I suggested he consider bankruptcy and retirement. Arthur's expression shifted from hopeful to angry. He called me selfish and petty, saying family should help family. He brought up supporting me, forgetting I'd earned every dollar. He accused me of holding a grudge. The lack of self-awareness was almost impressive. I stayed calm and told him the truth. He chose to give everything to Chloe despite my dedication. He dismissed my contributions and insulted my abilities. Those were his decisions, and the consequences were his to bear. I wasn't being petty, I was being smart, protecting what I had built. We didn't part on good terms. He left angry. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had finally stood up to him, set a clear boundary, and refused responsibility for his failures. The little girl who desperately sought his approval was gone. About 6 months later, Eleanor called me at 2 a.m. Arthur's restaurant had caught fire. The building was heavily damaged. She was at the hospital with Arthur, who'd inhaled a lot of smoke trying to salvage things before firefighters arrived. I went. Arthur would be physically fine, but emotionally devastated. Lying in that hospital bed, he looked completely defeated. The restaurant had been his identity, and watching it burn had broken something in him. Eleanor stepped out. In the uncomfortable silence, he started talking. He admitted his terrible mistake with Chloe, that his favoritism blinded him. He said he'd always been proud but didn't know how to show it. He apologized for dismissing my abilities. The words came too late, prompted by disaster, not reflection, but they were something. I appreciated the apology, but told him it changed nothing. I'd forgiven him in the sense of letting go of anger, but that didn't mean rescuing him or pretending the past didn't happen. Sometimes people must live with consequences. The fire investigation revealed the cause: faulty wiring, likely neglected maintenance. The insurance situation was a disaster. Arthur had reduced coverage to a bare minimum. The payout was significantly less than the damage. After settling debt, he had almost nothing left from his life's work. Chloe resurfaced, suddenly concerned for Arthur. She posted emotional messages about the tragedy, never acknowledging her role in running the business into the ground. She returned to casual jobs and social media, seemingly unable to grasp the gravity. Arthur and Eleanor downsized to a small condo, living off Social Security. My relationship with Arthur would never be what I hoped, but we reached a peaceful coexistence. My 3 Harvest Kitchen locations thrived. I built something sustainable based on quality, consistency, and respect. Staff stayed for years, customers returned for the experience. I eventually bought out my initial investors, taking Vivian on as a new partner. We opened a 4th location, developed a catering division. Industry publications featured our management. Years later, at a conference, a young woman approached me. She was Arthur's goddaughter's cousin, or some distant connection. She said Chloe had been bragging that the fire was a blessing, freeing Arthur from a burden. She claimed she tried to modernize a dinosaur, blaming Arthur's outdated thinking for its failure. The young woman was disgusted. I thanked her, but wasn't surprised. Some people never learn accountability. I sometimes think about the alternate timeline: if Arthur had recognized my abilities, maybe we'd have expanded together. But dwelling on what ifs is painful. Instead, I focus on what happened. I built a successful business through my own effort. I proved my worth to myself, which is more important than proving it to anyone else. I learned to set boundaries, trust my abilities, and not sacrifice myself for those who don't value my contributions. Those lessons are worth more than any inheritance. My restaurants carry on the genuine passion for food that Arthur's Place had in its prime. I employ over 100 people who receive fair treatment. I serve thousands who appreciate quality. That legacy is mine, built from knowledge, determination, and the willingness to bet on myself. Arthur's dismissive words still echo sometimes, but they've lost their power to hurt. I took those words and used them as fuel to build something he never could. While his legacy went up in smoke due to his poor choices, mine continues growing stronger. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes. Sometimes, it's simply undeniable success. Chloe's Instagram still features photos from her brief restaurant stint. She never deleted them. She never mentions how it ended. She's moved on to ventures that will probably fail when they require actual work. I'm 36 now, running 4 successful restaurants, planning a 5th. I have a team I trust. I have a business that reflects my values. I have proof I was never just a silly waiter, and I never needed my father's approval to become exactly who I was meant to be. That truth is worth more than all the family recognition I once desperately craved. The restaurant industry is brutal. It chews up people who aren't serious. Arthur learned that through Chloe's incompetence and his own misguided loyalty. I learned it through years of dedication and doing whatever it took to succeed. Only one of those paths leads to lasting success. What would you have done?